Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero. And I'd like to go over, and this is a special occasion for us at War Hero to Superhero, because every few months we have crazy months and we have a fifth week in the month. So I want to welcome you to a new section of our show called Superhero Sanctum. Yeah, we bring in the power hitters that go over and let our show thrive. So this is where we bring a special guest of influence to depart superhero tactics. Yeah. And to you, our beloved audience, to help you grow, because there's no point of listening to our stuff if you're not growing. If you're not transforming from the bedroom to the boardroom, man, I just need to quit right now. So our special guest is Jaime Chapman. She is an influential veteran and male spouse that helps her tribe become a high performer for these powerful businesses across the great United States of America. And that's definitely key in this COVID season, because if you're not connected with the super uber influential people, you might as well just go over and just work at McDonald's. And maybe McDonald's is influential. We might find out tonight. So she will share the wisdom for you to go over and thrive. So we're going to welcome her into the feed in a moment. And she's our Superhero Sanctum first guest. So thank you for joining. Jaime, do I have you?
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. So you get to be the first official guest on our Superhero Sanctum. So
awesome. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and she went over and put all that living room all by herself, like in 15 minutes. So again, superhero powers. For me, it takes me hours. For her, it takes seconds. All right. So let's go jump into it, because the first thing I think our guests want to know is about your business, because if you have all these influential connections, what is Begin Within?
Well, that's a really wonderful question. Thank you for asking. So Begin Within is a recruiting and staffing company. And what we specialize in is we place military spouses and veterans in careers with defense contractors that are located on or near military installations all over the world. So that way we can find and facilitate jobs for military spouses who live on those installations all over the place, and they can maintain continuity in their careers when they move from installation to installation.
And that's huge. I mean, because you move every 2 to 3 years, especially if you're from the officer track, you're like, it gets a little shorter each and every time as you get promoted and everything else. And just job hunting is a beast on itself. So especially now with the COVID season, I'm assuming that you're booming even more. People are like, yeah, give me a job, right?
It's funny. So we have another arm of the business. We started out in 2016. It was Jaime's hobby blog. And then we turned it into some career services, which, if you know anything about the military community, you know you get career resume writing services, career coaching, all that stuff for free.
Yeah.
But I kind of got my start in Begin Within as a USA Jobs resume writer. And so I still have people coming to me left and right for those services, whether they can get them for free or not. And it's funny because right before COVID, I was bound and determined. I'm only going to do recruiting. This is where the companies pay me for talent, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to just chop that off with no more resume writing, no more career coaching, nothing. But I can't keep people from coming to Begin Within for those services, since that's what we've been doing for the past few years.
Yeah. So it sounds like you can make two companies and make more money.
It makes twice the work.
Oh, yes. So maybe you can find some high performers to recruit to go over and do that for you while we're watching live. So that'd be awesome.
Well, that's definitely one of our biggest talent pipelines is folks that come to us inquiring about career services. And we're like, oh, hey, well, we've got these jobs. Would you like to apply for one? And they're like, sure, let me just go ahead and do that really quick. So that happens to be a really good talent pipeline for us as well. But I was bound and determined, because if you know anything about USA Jobs, it ain't a fun place to be hanging out. So I was just determined to get rid of that part of the business. But the need dictated, especially during COVID, it wasn't necessarily that I was generating my business from the companies looking for talent. It was the people looking for the jobs.
Yep.
Which there were a whole lot more of those swimming around than normal.
Oh, yeah. And President Trump went over and did you a wonder when he said, like, hey, we're not concerned about the education anymore. It's more about the experience. So it opened up the pool and everybody's like, yeah. And they started clicking. And that's probably the reason why you're booming in that section.
Yeah, something like that. We'll take the business. But, our primary focus is to placate and alleviate that military spouse unemployment that is 24%, if not higher right now in COVID. Our main function is to help military spouses find jobs. And by doing that, we also because guess who runs around in the military spouse community? It's their spouses who turn into veterans one day. So we get a lot of both pools of military spouses and veterans. But my primary mission with finding these folks jobs is to get rid of that 24% unemployment rate. It's absurd, and it's literally, of the data that I have seen, it's the highest unemployed demographic in the United States. And that is even comparing it to the working special needs adult population. Their unemployment is 21%.
Mm-hmm. And that's huge to even think about that. So basically 1 out of every 4 mil spouses or veterans, since you serve both those communities, are struggling to find either work in general or work that's employable enough to actually thrive and not just survive. So that's a great service to bring.
Well, it's what I'm really passionate about. In 2018, around September timeframe, the White House released the demographic information that told us military spouse unemployment is 24%. And in that same document, there's a lot of other scary statistics about how darn near 90% of military spouses have some college education, right? Ooh. And there's something about 50-ish% of military spouses are underemployed, meaning that they have more education than they're working in a job that requires, or that they are more qualified, they're earning less money and things like that. So the economic impact on military families in general is huge by military spouse unemployment and underemployment. And that lit a fire under my own butt, because I've been in the career services field for a while. And I was in the Army Reserves as a single soldier, right? I had no idea about the severity of military spouses not being able to find jobs until I married and became one. And then I was looking around like, what is going on with these people? Nobody's working. I can't figure it out. And then I search for a job myself. I have a hard time finding one, and go through this whole life and figuring it out on the fly still. But it was a really big dose of reality to transition from being a service member to a spouse. It was way harder, I thought, as being a spouse.
Yeah, because you didn't totally leave. You kind of are on the cusp on both ends. You're like, I'm in, but I'm out, and I'm trying to get employment. I'm trying to make my family go over and thrive, because now you got 2 bundles of joy now. So so that's a huge thing. So who's your target market? So we said veterans and male spouses, but who's your actual specific niche in there? Like who?
Okay, so we work with defense contractors. So if we're talking about business to business, if you want to hire us to find you talent, we work with defense contractors who employ folks that are on or around military installations. And so where I have a really big focus is obviously where I live in Fort Hood, America, in Texas. We have some efforts going on in Georgia. We also concentrate on those military areas that may have a large population of maybe Navy and Marine Corps on the coasts, right? Where there's in like the Virginia Beach area, and then like San Diego has huge military populations. And I don't care if you're in that area. I don't care if you're a defense contractor or not. I care that you want to hire the military community and gainfully employ them with a good job. So if you're looking to work with us, that's the kind of thing that we're going for, is where military communities are and people that want to gainfully employ them and provide them great jobs. There's tons of work that is not great, right? Available near military installations, but we're looking for good, high quality positions with the possibility of continuity. So we're thinking about contractors that have multiple locations. They may not be nationwide, but they may be a contractor that works on 5 or 6 different installations. And that increases the chances that that spouse can relocate and keep their job or transfer somewhere else. And then it also helps when the contractor has positions that can be remote. A lot of the time, most of the time, we place for in-person positions. But larger defense contractors often can handle taking on remote employees. So you might go start a job traditionally face-to-face in the beginning, and then upon relocation, that might be something that you can negotiate taking with you as a remote role.
That's really cool, because you want to have that continuity, and especially for family. It's like you got the PCS and everything else, and now you got to get adjusted to everything else. It'd be nice to have that job that seamlessly butts up to the next one. So that's really cool.
Well, that's the problem. That's why spouses are so unemployed, or at least partly, is because there's no continuity in traditional 9-to-5 unless a major Fortune 500 company that has locations all across the nation and world. And a piece of this is an OCONUS environment where there's spouses and families living abroad. There is a really, really severe unemployment rate over there that we do not even have articulated anywhere. There's no data that says here's overseas military spouse unemployment rates. In Germany, where I came from, where I just PCS'd from, there was an Army health assessment survey that estimated out of the 400 and something participants that the unemployment is 50-ish%. That same survey in Italy, an installation rated at 70%. And so these are, I'm not pulling these numbers out of thin air. They're based on survey data, but obviously they're not ironclad. But that's probably a really close picture to what unemployment looks like overseas. 50% in Germany, 70% in Italy, where spouses are not allowed to work from home because of SOFA status restrictions. And we don't even know about Japan and some of those other places that we happen to live. So it's a scary world, OCONUS, and we are working to build relationships, since that's where I just came from, with overseas-based employers. But one problem that we see is that US-based employers have a really hard time hiring over there because of the regulations. So it's a challenge.
And that's huge. And especially with unemployment, when I've been unemployed, I've been almost homeless before. And then once those benefits run out, they don't count you anymore. So you still can be unemployed, but you're like, hey, benefits ran out, and then they don't count you anymore. They're like, boop, you're not on the list. So the numbers are only accurate based on people filing for unemployment. So the numbers are probably could be lower, could be higher. I would suggest more higher.
Unemployment numbers, any unemployment numbers, especially when it's based on survey data, you have to be careful with it. And then you don't get a hyper-localized unemployment number. So in Germany, for instance, I lived in USAG Wiesbaden. Right down the road, there's Kaiserslautern with all the Ramstein Air Base stuff going on. That's the largest concentration of service members outside of the United States. They probably both have drastically different unemployment rates. So we just can't rely exclusively on unemployment data to get a realistic picture of where you might actually be living. And I wish that was out there and available, but nobody's collecting that data, so it's not available.
Maybe a job you can create. There you go.
I've been knocking on people's doors about that. Hey, you're from this bureau of blah, 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 blah. Would you like to collect unemployment data for military spouses overseas? And people look at me like I have four eyes.
Hey, if it pays as much as a COVID inspector for that much money, I might just go over and do it part-time.
Somebody should. I've definitely been the squeaky wheel on that one and tried to shake some trees and rattle some cages and grab attention and direct the spotlight towards OCONUS unemployment specifically, because it gets rolled into the overall unemployment data for the 24%. But if you segregated it, I don't think it would be fair to the OCONUS spouses. And to me, as a military family, what do we all do? We all sign up and we put Germany as our number one pick on the list where we get stationed. But if we knew as a spouse, that has a 70% unemployment percentage. Realistically, for our family, I can't work when I'm there, possibly. Maybe you wouldn't put Germany as your favorite location. Maybe you would put something stateside.
Yeah, that would be drastically different in that regard. So now you're going over and working with these, military and mil spouses and veterans, not military, but veterans and mil spouses. What skills and talents do they need to become that top performer?
Okay, so when I am, putting my recruiter hat on, like I have a job I need to fill, and that employer wants me to find somebody qualified. And Jamie, the empathetic military spouse and veteran, I look at your potential and I see that you could do that job, right? On paper, I know that with your background, you could do that job, but I need tangible results that provide context, scope, and scale. And so when I'm going down your resume and I'm comparing it to this job requisition that I have to fill, I need to make sure that you fit and that the recruiter at that company thinks you fit as well, because they're not necessarily Jamie, the empathetic military spouse and veteran. There is concrete stuff that you need to have to be qualified for that job. And so if I'm going through resumes, I know all of the people that applied for that job probably could do it, but I need people with that tangible proof that they have done it before. Or they've performed another role to supplement their experience, or education to supplement some kind of a proof or validation that they are qualified for that job requisition. It's not one of those things where if you hit 5 out of the 10 skills I'm going to send you forward, I need you to hit 8 out of the 10 skills to send you forward, because I have to supply the best, most highly qualified talent to the employer. And it has to be, the proof has to be in the pudding on the resume and the documentation that you submit. So when I put on my recruiter hat, that's what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. When I'm Jaime and I'm talking to this candidate on the phone, I am providing them feedback and saying, look, I know you did this. I need you to quantify this resume bullet, provide X, Y, and Z information if you did it, and resubmit this. And then we might have a shot at it. Mm-hmm. But I'm a busy gal. Like, I can't go through hundreds of resumes and coach every single person. So I need you to come through with some effort in the front, you know, mm-hmm. on the front end. Don't make me go back and recorrect your resume and things like that. Just make my job easy for me. And that's how you get forwarded on to these employers who want to hire you. Because if they're working with me, they want to make hires from our talent pool. They want military spouses and they want veterans. Mm-hmm. But again, they don't want military spouses that are not qualified for the job on paper. So I have to take, you know, my heart out of it sometimes and be a little bit cold and say, mm-hmm. look, your resume isn't cutting it. You either have to redo this or you're not going to get sent on, you know. Sorry about your bad luck.
So it sounds like our listeners out there, and as this is getting on Podopolo and other places that we're broadcasting out in the Easy Way Network, that if you're meeting 8 out of 10 of the skill sets of the major job qualification, you're going to get a fast track to get access to those major companies that you're connected with.
Well, the truth of the matter is that a recruiter, unless it's something highly technical, right? Mm-hmm. If it's something where they want to make a hire, you know, and they have to be, I did correct myself. Recruiters might have a preference, right? They would like to hire a military spouse or a veteran, mm-hmm. but they still have to be objective during their hiring. And if the military spouse isn't the best qualified, they're going to hire the not military spouse candidate that was qualified, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so, you know, they're not going to just, you might see it listed as a military spouse preferred or a veteran preferred position. And then they give you this voluntary disclosure where you can disclose, yes, I'm a military spouse or a veteran, right? Mm. But they're not even allowed legally to ask you, are you married? Which asking, are you a military spouse, is asking someone if they are married. So it has to be voluntary. And so with all these rules and regulations in place, make people's job as easy as possible for them. If they want to prefer to hire a military spouse, come through as the best qualified candidate, period. And so what that means is that you need to be deliberate in the jobs you're applying for. Don't take your generic resume and spray and pray it to 100 random job openings on the internet. Take some, be very deliberate and apply for jobs that you are really qualified for. If you're stretching too much and you're only hitting 6 out of 10 of those qualifications, truth is you're probably wasting your time. So
that's really good to understand that if you're reading the job description, you're like, hey, my resume or myself that's 8 out of 10, then a contextualized, curtailed, you know, formatted resume is going to get past that APS or get past that recruiter then to go on to the interview. That's
right. That's right. And we'll help you at Begin Within. You know, if we see people that had that potential, that didn't submit a resume that's hot garbage with a bunch of errors and stuff, if we know you tried, but you're just barely missing the mark, we're going to do some coaching and get you there before we send you on. Because again, you know, if you think of us, if you're the job seeker, you think of Begin Within as your headhunter, we want you to get the job, right? But our boss in this situation isn't you, the job seeker. Our boss is the employer. They're the one that pay the bills at the end of the month for us, right? Like they're the ones that say, get us qualified candidates, period, end of story. And oh yeah, by the way, we'd like it if they were a military community member. And we're like, all right, we'll go get them for you. But we have to be, you know, we have to be picky. We provide the top talent, right? We're looking at folks that are, we do have, you know, entry level positions and things like that, but we always supply the best talent out there. So we're not just, you know, it's different if you're working with a major headhunting agency, like maybe your Robert Halfs of the world or something like that. They send an employer 100 resumes at a time, if not more.
Yeah.
We send 3-5 resumes and that's it. And that may interview for the position if they so choose. But we are very selective, and we're not in the volume game, we're in the quality game.
No, and that's huge. I mean, especially as a person that puts a job out there. I mean, there's like roughly, when I was applying for jobs, and it was like I was told 2,000 applicants are applying for that job. So you have your application processing system, boom, set you go. It tries to filter out as much as you can, and you can still get a couple hundred. Like I did nanny interviews, and I had, what was it, 200 people that applied to be a nanny for my family. I cut it down to 70, and then I'm like, up, group interview, and they're like, what? I'm like, qualifier. I went from 70 to 7 because they didn't want to do a group interview. And I told them straight up, I'm like, I'm doing a group interview. I'm going to ask you 5 or 10 questions. You guys are going to talk to each other. You're going to interview each other. Boom. I went from 70 to 7. And we want to go over and give time to everybody. But the thing is that 200 people at 30 minutes a pop, that's 100 hours. That's like, now I got to decide if I remember from 2.5 weeks ago, was it Susie or Johnny that was the best qualified, you know?
Yeah. That's part of it. And this is Jamie, the career coach hat, right? If I'm coaching you to do job interviews and to write your resume, a part of that is being memorable. And I don't mean, being the person that walked in and had BO memorable. I'm talking about coming in and like knocking people's socks off as an applicant and as an interviewee and everything like that. Because what happens when you interview 10 people, you remember the bottom 1 or 2 that were horrible. And you're like, oh my gosh, that guy had the worst interview ever. He had pit stains on his shirt and he spilled ketchup on there right before he walked in. He wasn't even hygienic, right? That's very judgy to say, but it happens. And then they only remember the top 2. So there's these 6 candidates right there in the middle that they can't remember or distinguish from each other. They remember the worst ones and they remember a couple of the best ones. And we want to coach you to be the best ones only. And that's the only people we bring forward. Because if you're middle of the road, people do forget you. They're busy. They're walking in after a meeting. They're interviewing you. And they're going right back to another meeting or doing something like that. And they have to like really be impressed and smitten with you when your interview is over for them to
Yeah, it's like dating to get married in a sense.
It is.
Too bad they don't present you a ring or a rose. Like, will you take this rose of a job? And I've had people do that. They didn't give me a rose, but they try to give me this job. And I had 2 people competing. They're like 15, and then it went 16 and went to 17 and 18. I'm like, my wife's like, just grab a job. I said, I'm going to ride this thing and see how much they can give. So that's the best interviews when you have that, is when you have those people competing, but you want to be the top compared to the bottom.
Well, and that's a sign. If you are getting offer after offer, right? It's a good sign that you're coming in always and consistently as that top qualified candidate. What's a bad sign is if you're getting interview after interview after interview, you're not getting offers, or you're getting low ball offers that they can probably do better. That means that you're probably more middle of the road, or maybe the company's just cheap. So there's indicators as a job seeker. Once you've had those job interviews, the result of that, it gives you a clue as to how you're performing as an applicant. And I think that's part of this, is just being self-aware and correct as you go. If you made a mistake and you got a lowball offer, or if you got an offer or no offer at all, you can self-correct, take an objective look at yourself, and then next time do it better.
Yeah, and that's huge to understand. So transitioning from there, so I'm coming out of the military. I'm going to pretend I came out again, out of the military. So I came out of the military and I want to market myself, and I want to take my military and my personnel skills to the marketplace. So what do I need to go over and do to make that tangible?
Okay, so this is the basic question a lot of folks ask, is how do I translate my military skill set to the civilian world? First of all, it depends on what you do in the military. An easy example is to take an infantryman. You're not going to go into the civilian world, more than likely, and jump out of pickup trucks and shoot guns at people. So we need to think of those other skills that you have as a service member, where they're tangible and that a company wants them, right? So you can handle weapons, you can jump out of trucks. Cool. We don't care about that. What we care about is leadership, the ability to clearly communicate, and your other soft skills. Your hard skills, shooting guns and jumping out of the truck, communication, and it's a whole laundry list of skills that come from being a service member in general. You're disciplined, you can follow instructions and things like that.
Mhm.
Now, that's just a very basic example of being an infantryman and jumping out of pickup trucks and shooting guns. But then we go into things that may be more technical, right? They may even be top secret, and you're not even allowed to talk about what you did. And so we come into this whole arena of what kind of transition are you having? Let's say you were in Intel. A person is smart enough to know, if you explain to them that I was a service member and I was an Intel analyst, they're smart enough to know you can't tell them exactly what you did. But again, you fall back on your soft skills, leadership, communication, your skills in analysis in general, languages that you may have. Those are hard skills that are tangible and relatable to an employer.
Mhm.
But we have to really consider what kind of a pivot you're making, if at all. If you're an Intel analyst in the military and you want to go work for, Booz Allen Hamilton and be an Intel analyst, not a big jump. But if you want to go to another Fortune 500 company and do marketing or social media management or something like that, we have a lot of work to do in branding you. And it may help to do marketing or social media management for a contractor that does Intel work so that you're more relatable as an applicant. You find that niche first, you get the hard, tangible skills in marketing first, and then you can transition later to do a job in another company that may sell a product in another category, right? That's not Intel analyst. So there's a way to use your skills and your niche and move into a totally different job, and kind of think of it as a stepping stone where you're developing the hard skills you need to go on later and do what you want to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like the same thing in the military. You go over and you change from one MOS to another MOS, and you use that as a stepping stone to get to the next rank. But the only difference is you're taking your skill sets from the military and saying, how can I pivot that to this place, and then use that as a stepping stone? Because the great thing about the civilian world is you're not committed to a quote unquote long-term contract.
At least I hope not. Most military transition, if you're a military service member and you're exiting the military or retiring, most of you do not keep that first job out of the military. Usually within 1 or 2 years, that job is going to change. And in general, the Bureau of Labor Statistics put out some data that overall, people in the workforce switch jobs every 4 years. It's 4.2 years. And that data is different based on your age category. Like, for example, 20-somethings are usually over 3 years, right? Not quite 4 years. And that's how long that you keep that job. So tenure in the workforce is not very long for anyone at all. But then military folks, that first job, a lot of the time they don't really keep it and they move on and do something different later. It's kind of taking that first step, getting used to being a civilian. And especially the longer you served in the military, I find that first step is one of the more crucial things that you'll do in your careers, because you're almost switching your identity over the course of that year or two. If you've been a service member for only 4 years, your identity isn't necessarily as integrated into being in the military. And you don't have this is me generalizing, but that's the trend I've seen, is that you don't have as hard of a time transitioning the less amount of time you've served in the military.
Yeah, and I've seen that myself too. It's like the older veterans, and we do have first responders that watch the show, but the longer we're in that culture, the longer it takes to break from that culture and to do that. So that's why we talk about transformation. It's not just a transition back. So speaking of transitions, there's one more question I wanted to tackle with this, is that, do you offer virtual employment opportunities? And if you do, or if you've done this before, how do you empower people to get there? Because that's a whole different world that we're tackling now. Because we went COVID and everybody's like, let's get on the computer. And I'm like, some people have been doing it. Like one of my people I'm working on a course, she's been doing it for 20 years. Other people have been doing it for 20 minutes. So if you're trying to look for that virtual employment work, do you guys offer it? And how do you make the difference in that regard? How do you make yourself marketable? Because they're like, looks good on video.
Okay, so virtual employment is a whole niche. It's a whole Pandora's box and can of worms. I will say the vast majority of the positions are maybe not so much seems to be virtual right now, but there is, I've done some career coaching for an organization called Workforce that places military spouse in remote jobs. That's from Kimber Hill. She's amazing. Check out Workforce if you're a military spouse. And it's all about, again, there's some additional skills that it requires when you do work from home. Your discipline, your time management. Everybody's concerned about, your accountability. Are you integral? Things like that. But more importantly, can you prove that you can get results for that company while working from home? I don't care. There's certain jobs, right? There's certain jobs that require a quiet, dedicated background, or a quiet, dedicated space. You're going to be interfacing with customers on phone calls, things like that. And then there's some jobs that do not care if you've got monkeys crawling on your back, right? And a child in his underwear trashing your office. That's happened to me. Yeah. They don't care because they just want to know that you can get results and you're not in a customer facing role. And so it just depends. In a virtual world, you're going to want to advertise that you're, disciplined, you're able to work from home. And I recommend, if you've never worked from home before, try to freelance. This brings me to another organization I love. My good friend Jay Sheehan and his business partner Jordy own a company called Freelance Vets, VETS, freelancevets.com. They just created it, and it's a website where military spouses and veterans can work from as a freelancer, right?
Awesome.
And the point of that is saying, if you've never worked in a fully remote role, get your feet wet. Jump on one of these freelancing websites. Highly recommend Freelance Vets. Freelance a little bit, maybe do it part-time. Or if you are working currently in a 9-to-5 traditional position, ask your boss if it's okay to work every Tuesday and Thursday from home. And the point of you doing that is to aggregate the data and say, here's how I obtain results for my company while working from home. Yeah. And the point is that people don't have that question, is Jaime going to be able to perform if she's working from home? You've got it there, you've proven it, and you have the ability to say so. And just like being a regular job seeker for any position, you target the positions that you want, and you tailor your resume and your application to those positions. And it's the same thing. You're just adding another layer of, I can obtain results for you while working from home.
And that's awesome. So let's take a summary of that. And we would love to give the audience 3 superhero tactics that you could give our audience to apply. So they come off the street, they say, hey, I want to be a high performer. What 3 superhero tactics that are fast, applicable, and right there that they can bring that gets them to go over and to thrive?
Okay. First thing, start focusing. And I hate to say this because it sounds crazy, but start focusing on your numbers, start focusing on your tangible results. And the reason you're doing that is to provide context, scope, and scale. I have never written a C-suite level executive resume before that didn't provide context, scope, and scale. Because if you manage a budget, that's cute and all, but is it a $5,000 budget or is it a $5 million budget, right? If you've supervised human beings in the workplace before, you have a team of 2, or is it a team of 2,000, right? That scale makes a really big difference. And even if you're afraid, if you're shy and your numbers aren't high numbers, the point is to provide them so that that recruiter and that hiring team knows, here is the level of work they have done. And again, it's about not what you could do, it's about what you have done. And then you scale your career up from there. So that's the first thing, provide context, scope, and scale. The second thing is, no matter what work you're doing, take it seriously and work your butt off. I hate to say this, but a lot of the time we get these transitioning military veterans that come out of the military. They were managing multi-million-dollar budgets and a couple hundred people. And then they get a more entry-level managerial position where they're only managing a team of 5, but they don't take that job seriously. They underperform, and then the rest of their career is negatively impacted because they got off to a slow start after separating from the military. Yeah. So no matter what your job is, whether you perceive it to be as glorious as your military experience or not, take it seriously and perform. So context, scope, and scale. Take your next job seriously if you're transitioning from the military. applicant, take the time rather than doing the spray and pray, right? And sending out 100 generic resumes. Take your time on one application and hit that 8 out of 10 mark and be the best applicant for that job. Your results will be better slowly and surely applying for 10 jobs than that spray and pray to 100 jobs method.
Yeah, maybe I should have followed that. I applied for over 2 million jobs during that season. So I wasn't just spray, I was annihilate. I was like a nuclear bomb. So that's huge wisdom on that regard. So I want to thank you, Jaime, for going over and joining us. And for the people that are going on watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on the Easy Way wall, and Eric Zuli went over and shared it out to a couple more places. And again, on the Superhero Sanctum, just like when we do our War Hero to Superhero interviews, we only have one spot on our TV show because they only air once a week. So if you want Jaime to be uplifted to the television show to go and get to our total audience, all I ask you is to dedicate 3 seconds of your time. We prefer you to take all the wisdom that Jaime dropped for 36 minutes and 13 seconds and counting. But if you don't have the time per se, if you love Jaime and what she goes over and does, give her 3 seconds of time on Facebook and we'll count that. If she gets the most views in 72 hours, boom, she gets uplifted to the TV show and distributed in 15 different platforms. So if you want Jaime to uprise to the next level, 3 seconds of time. So Jaime, I want to give you the floor one more time. Is there any last advice you want to pass on before we close out?
No, but I do appreciate your time today. And it's always a good time to chat with you. And I was really looking forward to the Military Influencer Conference and seeing you again in person, but it's been delayed until next year. So
yeah.
Anyway, but no, I appreciate your audience for listening. And I hope that if there's any help that you need, feel free to reach out and contact me. The easiest way to reach me is to go to my website, jchapman.com, and reach out, ask any questions you have, and I'm happy to help.
You also got the ticker link right down there with Begin Within. You can go over and look there directly too. So
awesome. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you on the flip side.